We have been to church. Pastor, from the first note of the choir and orchestra to Melissa's climactic operatic presentation of honor to the Lord, this is what a church service ought to be. And one day we will all stand before the throne. We will kneel and say, "All hail the power of Jesus' name. Let angels prostrate fall, and we with them will bring forth the royal diadem and crown him Lord of all." When he enters the throne room, all will rise. And there will be a time when we will enjoy him forever. But in addition to that, there will be a time when every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. I came to tell you that you're not the product of evolution. You probably knew that. But I came to reinforce with evidence the fact that you're the product of the special creation of the God of the universe, the God of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light, and God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. The light he called day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. God, who at sundry times and in divers manners spake in time past unto the fathers, hath in these climactic final days spoken unto us by his Son, the heir of all things, by whom he created the worlds. Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power. For thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. When the choir began to sing this morning, the mighty name of Jesus, I was ready. Preacher, I said in my heart, they're singing about my God. All things were made by him and for him. We said, "God, who are you? How much do you love us?" And he said, "This much." And we nailed him to a cross. And we placed him in a cold, dark tomb. But that's not the end of the story. 72 hours later, he was found alive by his own power, and the grave is still empty. Jesus Christ is alive. I came to just give you a bit of evidence to reemphasize that he's the Lord of glory. And the least we can do is to submit ourselves a living sacrifice to him. I want you to know that I'm conscious of what you're thinking today. Every person in this audience is thinking four thoughts simultaneously. In fact, geneticists have realized that it is impossible, since all climes and all civilizations have given evidence that man has always thought these basic thoughts and has asked four basic questions, that it is impossible for man who is man not to ask these questions. In fact, every experience that you have, every sermon that you hear, every special like the one we just heard, is reenactment for you to reappraise the answer to these four questions. All men everywhere have asked these questions. I have had the privilege of speaking in at least 22 countries and representing our Lord and creation in one vein or another. And I remember stating that to a university audience on foreign soil, that at the major universities in the philosophy department at every major university, there are four questions they ask. And as I would give these four questions, the students and the professor would nod their heads. Pastor, I remember speaking to a group of individuals in Fiji, dark-skinned individuals, scantily clad, with histories in their own families of cannibalism. And as these men were seated on the logs and their ladies were standing behind them, that's their culture. The ladies were standing behind them, the palms waving, the blue Pacific. I felt impressed, like Dennis Swift said a moment ago, you just do what God nudges you to do. And I said, by the way, I've spoken to various audiences, and there are 4 questions that people always ask, and the interpreter stated that. And then I said, number 1, first question is, who am I? What's my personal worth? Who am I? And all of those men on that log with the blue Pacific waving in the background said, Vinaka, that's right, we ask, who am I? Personal identification, personal worth. I said, the second question is, where did I come from? Life origins. How did I get here? They said, Vinaka, we ask that question. I said, the third question is, now that I'm here, what's my purpose here? What am I doing here? They said, Vinaka, we ask that question. What purpose do we have in life? Then I said, the fourth question is, are you getting this? Who am I? Where did I come from? Life origins. What's my purpose here? The fourth question is, where am I going after this is over? They said, Vinaka, we ask, where are we going after this life? So I know what you're thinking. Who am I? Where did I come from? What's my purpose here? And where am I going? Ladies and gentlemen, there are 5 things that all men know. And in all climes and civilizations of history, they've always known this because the literature reflects this. 5 things that all men know. Number 1, they know there is a God, but they have no fellowship with that God. Madeline Murray O'Hare knew there was a God. I debated her on KMOX in St. Louis, Missouri. She wouldn't show up, so I debated her debate. Who won? Well, I don't know who won, but I know who lost. She's a loser because she was on the side of errant, philosophic thought. She was not on the side of the truth. So Madeline Murray O'Hare knew there was a God. She knew John 3:16 as well as you know John 3:16. Altizer, the father of the God is dead movement, knew there was a God, and as a teenager he said, God, you leave me alone and I'll leave you alone. And God took him at his word. Ultimately to him, God was dead. God was not dead, but he was dead to a relationship with God. So his perspective was that God was dead because he had no sense of the presence of God. He had ruled him out of his life. Perspective is extremely important. Number 1, all men know there is a God, but they know they have no fellowship with that God. Number 2, all men know there is life after death, but they're not sure where it is. Number 3, all men know they have sinned, but they have no liberty from that sin. Number 4, all men know there's a judgment, and they have no hope in it. Number 5, all men know there is death, and they fear it. You know these things. I know these things. I came to give you some answers. One of the problems that the evolutionary community has is they refuse to adopt any philosophy that gives a final answer to anything. The very method of science is to always be learning. Well, we can always learn, but along the way we can nail down some facts. And I found the answer in an old book called the Bible. I went through there was a time, I was taught as a young man that the Bible was the Word of God, and I went through educational processes, and I came to a temporary conclusion that, well, now, wait a minute. There are long ages of time, long history to the universe and planet Earth. I didn't know all the facts at that time. God said He created man literally on a specific day, but I've now learned that man has progressed through an evolutionary series. Of course, I was wrong. And I said to myself, I remember pondering this for a long period of time. And I said, wait a minute. If I came by evolution and God said that He created me, God lied to me, and I couldn't trust a God who would lie to me. So I adopted atheistic evolution. But I was the most miserable man on the face of the earth. And then God, aren't you glad for God's faithfulness? Intellectually, I abandoned Him, but He lived within me, and He could not deny Himself, and I knew that there was a still small voice, and His name was Jesus Christ. He was alive. And during those dark hours of my questioning, God was always there. Home was with Him. Maybe I'm speaking to some errant Christian who has been caught up in an academic process or the process of bitterness in life and disappointment in life, and you've wondered, maybe you need to make your way even before I finish this lecture sermon this morning, and make your way and say, God, forgive me. You've been there all the time, and I just need a renewed fellowship with you. Then God led me through theistic evolution, and after acquiring more of information, came to what I want to give you today, some information that evolution will not work. God didn't use evolution, and that the long periods of time are not there. Everything is recent. And finally, I returned home and have had the privilege of declaring to an entire generation, at least 6 million people each week, the fact that the Bible was right all along, and that there's a tremendous body of evidence supporting creation. How many hours do you have this morning? Can you listen fast? We need to get our perspective right on this thing. God's been right all along. We just have to be redirected. These two blondes. Now, I got this from Kent Hovind. He can get away with it because he's blonde. Part of his family's blonde. And they're all super intelligent, so he can get away with telling these blonde stories. These two blondes were standing on a balcony on the Mediterranean in a luxury hotel overlooking the placid sea. And they were enjoying the rays of the moon. First blonde said, "Which do you think is farther, London or the moon?" Second blonde said, "Hello, can you see London from here?" Well, their perspective wasn't quite right. We need to get our perspective right. Some years ago, the world's two leading astrophysicists, Sir Frederick Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe, got their minds together. Now, these were the intellectual elite, the very best in their field, recognized globally. Now, what's an astrophysicist? An astrophysicist is one who's got it all together. He has a background in physics, chemistry, biology, astronomy. He has the best of education. He's able to measure the distance to the farthest star and weigh the mass of the universe, all without leaving his laboratory. He's able to interpret the orchestral sounds of the universe. These two elite astrophysicists, Sir Frederick Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe, were atheistic in their background. Because of their perspective, like the two blondes, because of their perspective, they were sure that the entire universe and all living systems had arisen by naturalistic evolutionary processes. That was their perspective. And now that they had all of this background in math and physics and all of this experience with the best astronomy elite, and had access to the libraries and the literature, they were ready to tackle the problem. They wanted to once and for all remove any need for a God in the universe and show that just given enough time, mathematically, life would arise in a favorable climate. So after 10 years of access to the best literature and libraries and academia of the world, they published their results. Now, they were atheistic in their approach, and they began this search by saying, just given enough time, in a favorable context, life will arise spontaneously. And finally, they published in Nature magazine, and here's what they published. They said, to our surprise, we found that the chance of a single enzymatic protein, a protein with a specific purpose, a single enzymatic protein, the chance that a single enzymatic protein could arise naturalistically is one chance in 10 to the 40,000th power. Now, do we have a math professor here today? Do we have anyone who's ever studied math here today? If we had a math professor, and I'm sure there are math professors, you just don't want me to ask you a question you can't answer. I know, I wouldn't stand up if I were there. But if we had a math professor here would say, if I ask him, how big is that number, 10 to the 40,000th? He would say that it's light years beyond any chance of possibility. One chance in 10 to the 40,000th. Let me just give you a reference. Are you still awake? Boy, we've had a service. Don't go to sleep on me now. Let me just give you a reference as to how big that number is, or how small that one chance in that number is. The smallest unit of measurable material we know anything about in the universe is an electron. An electron is 1/2000th the mass of a proton. The smallest unit of measurable material we know anything about in the universe is an electron. Every atom has at least one electron. Most of the atoms have many more than one. How many electrons are they? Take our planet Earth, our solar system, our arm of Orion, our Milky Way galaxy. Take all 225 billion galaxies, each comprised of over 500 million stars. Are you getting all this? Put them all together. How many electrons are there in the universe? The technical literature, and this is in the book that you were holding in your hand. By the way, that's a gift to you, and I'll autograph it. My autograph and $1 will buy you a cup of coffee at McDonald's. That's a gift to you, Pastor, and I'll autograph if you want my autograph after service. In that book, I give the technical reference of that and a lot of other material and the things I'm going to give in the next 3.5 hours. I'm not going to get to the PowerPoint program, so I'm just going to shut it off because I want to get to you in the final moments. All right, back to what that number is. Take the entire universe, all 225 billion galaxies, each comprised of over 500 million stars. Put them all together. How many electrons do we have in the physical universe? The technical literature reports that we have 10 to the 80th power of electrons in the entire universe. But most of the universe is just space. Fill all space with electrons so that you can't cram one more electron in the entire universe. How many electrons would you have? 10 to the 135th power of electrons? How far beyond? That number is 10 to the 40,000th. It is light years. Anything beyond one chance in 10 to the 50th power has zero chance of occurring. Now, did you get all that? Now, those are electrons. Now, let me talk about living systems for a moment. Oh, by the way, back to Sir Frederick Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe. They said, we now realize that it is scientifically impossible for even an enzymatic protein to have arisen by naturalistic evolution. They said, to illustrate how impossible it is, they said it would be easier for a whirlwind to sweep through a junkyard and assemble a Boeing 747 jet in flight out the other end than it would be for a single protein to have arisen by evolutionary processes. They said, it looks like something or someone, spelled with a capital S, has monkeyed with, and I like their choice of words, has monkeyed with the chemistry, the physics, and the biology of the universe. I know who has monkeyed with it. I know who did the tinkering, and I know when he did it, and his name was Jesus, by the way. Okay, now, if you got that with a single protein, did you get all that? Now, let me blow your mind, because it blows my mind just to think about this. Shut the PowerPoint off so they'll listen to me, okay? I've only got 15 minutes. You're going to have to listen fast. You have approximately, some more, some less, 100 trillion cells in your body. Those cells are specific. They do specific things. But in the nucleus of each one is the information programmed in all of them together. Now watch closely. In every cell in your body, 100 trillion of them, not only do you have the DNA, the deoxyribonucleic acid, you have the lysosomes, you have the RNA, protein synthesis factory, all of those things, but you've got 60,000 of these proteins, many of them enzymes that do specific things, in 100 different configurations, and every one of them is specific. Now, whoever did the tinkering had to put them all together at the same time, because if you take one of them, wait a while, put another one there, it won't work. They all have to be synergistically aligned at the same time, all functioning, or none of it will function. By the way, surrounding that nucleus in each cell of your body is what's called endoplasmic reticulum. I'm not cursing, preacher. Those are deacons in this church. Endoplasmic reticulum comes in two flavors, smooth and rough. And every protein, as it's synthesized in that cell, is processed through, you still awake? Processed through this ribbon-like endoplasmic reticulum. And as it's processed through there, it's given a zip code. A man received the Nobel Prize for learning that, and he should get the Nobel Prize. It's given a zip code so it knows where to go. Aren't you glad it knows where to go? Wouldn't you hate for proteins designed to form eyelashes ended up on your toenails? Or worse still, wouldn't you hate for proteins designed to produce toenails ended up on your eyelashes? Wouldn't that be terrible? They know where to go. It's absolutely incredible. Now, what's the chance? This is in the technical literature, and it's in the book at the back. The price just went up $89.95 for the book. No, I'm trying to. I don't get anything from those books. I'm trying to invest in your life. Still awake on me? Watch closely. In every cell, you have 100 trillion of those cells. In every cell of your body, you have these 60,000 proteins in 100 different configurations. They all have to be specific, in place, doing the right thing. In the technical literature, it's admitted. What's the chance that just in a single cell alone, and you've got 100 trillion of those cells, and each cell's different, in one cell alone, what's the chance that those 60,000 proteins in 100 different configurations could self-assemble, all functioning simultaneously? Hold to your pew. The chance is one chance in 10 to the 4,468,296 power. Did you get that? One chance in 10 to the 4,496,296 power. 248,296 power. That means that the odds that you were designed and created is 10 to the 4,446,296 power to 1. I like those odds. That means it is absolutely sure that you were designed and created. Let me tell you one more thing, and then I'm finished. I want to talk about your brain. According to evolution, we evolve what we're going to use and what we're going to need. But I want to tell you how smart you really are. You have 100 trillion cells in your body, but you have 100 billion cells in your brain. Some more, some less. You have 100 billion cells in your brain. Each one of those has 50,000 neuron connections to other brain cells. You're fearfully and wonderfully made, and you're all put together. And in your brain, in the book, I cite the technical literature showing that one human brain is more complicated than all the rest of the physical universe combined. Did you get that? Your brain is more complicated in structure than all the rest of the physical universe combined. And you've got 100 billion brain cells, each with 50,000 neuron connections to other brain cells. Every second of your life, your brain receives, processes, and transmits over 100 million signals every second from the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. Every second, 100 million signals all your life. If you learn something new every second of your life and assimilated that with what you already know, and that happens automatically, by the way, you never forget anything. It's just the recall that's the problem. Now, you need these figures. If you can't write them down, you need the book. And I don't get any money on that book. Watch closely. If you learn something new every second of your life and assimilated that with what you already know, it would take you over 3 million years to use up your brain capacity. Now, if you got here by evolution and you're only going to live about 98 or 115, why did you evolve a brain that could go on for 3 million years, learning something new every second? Something just is out of perspective. But by the way, you don't learn something new every second. In the course of 24 hours, we think approximately 10,000 concepts. The rest of the time, we're out to recess. That's our favorite subject in school, recess. In the course of 24 hours, we think approximately 10,000 concepts. That's 1/4 of the potential. So, on a practical basis, now think with me and I'll finish in the next hour and 15 minutes. I'll finish. I got 8 minutes. I can watch the clock, but you can't. Okay, hold on. Okay, but it's not the preacher saying keep preaching it, so I got to stop. Okay, watch closely. So on a practical basis, you got 3 million years times 4. How many million years could you, on a practical basis, go on without using up your brain capacity? 12 million years, right? That's wonderful. But now I've got news for you. Because of oxygen deprivation, lack of oxygen in a single atmosphere where we're dependent on the hemoglobin alone to pick up the oxygen and run it through the bloodstream, in a single atmosphere like we have today, 14.7 pounds per square inch. Here's this mother incubating, gestating this child. But she's not getting enough oxygen, so she surely can't get enough to him. Before you were born, in the 3rd trimester, you still awake? In the 3rd trimester, there's a tremendous proliferation of brain cells. And the design of the cranium is to accommodate all of those, or if they don't survive, to flush them out. And a brain cell dies in 4 to 6 minutes of oxygen deprivation. So here's this precious mother incubating, gestating this precious child, but not getting enough oxygen. So in the 3rd trimester, do you realize that you produce genetically 200 billion brain cells, but you lose half of them in the 3rd trimester in that tremendous proliferation of brain cells? How many knew you were playing with half a deck anyhow? Genetically, we produce 200 billion brain cells, but due to oxygen starvation, we ended up with only 100 billion brain cells. Yet, with 100 billion brain cells, if we have the right background, we can measure the distance to the farthest star, weigh the mass of the universe, interpret the signals of the orchestral concert throughout all of nature, all without leaving the office building, if we have the right training. You're capable of doing that. Wow, with 100 billion brain cells. But now, what if you had lived in the antediluvian world and the world before Noah's flood, where due to the smaller diameter of the earth, but with the same mass, we had twice our current atmospheric pressure. We know that from academic research. 16 times I've been under 2 atmospheres of pressure. What does it feel like? It feels wonderful. It feels like you belong. You never have to reach for a breath of air. It's already there. And amazingly, at Texas A&M, they found that if you double the atmospheric pressure, something magical happens. Well, no, it's not magic, it's design. The hemoglobin is saturated with 4 oxygen molecules. That's all it can take. But if you double the atmospheric pressure, the entire blood plasma becomes saturated with oxygen. I saw an open wound healed in 45 minutes. It was on the foot of my wife. 45 minutes to heal an open wound under 2 atmospheres of pressure with enriched oxygen. Wow. So what if you had been born prior to the flood? No wonder they didn't have computers. They didn't need them. They were computers. What if you were born with all 200 billion of your brain cells due to the appropriate supply of oxygen? You would be a super Einsteinian genius. Everybody was. But came to the point that beyond their capacity to think and love was their capacity to sin, and every imagination of the thoughts of their heart was only evil continually. So God, of course, wiped out that pre-flood world because, watch this, because the degrees of punishment in hell's a reality. If you live 800 or 900 years and learn to sin so violently that you can't do anything but sin, God in love makes it not possible for you to live so long. You follow what I'm saying? God's a merciful God. Now back to you, and let's wind this thing up. What if you had been born with all 200 billion brain cells? How long could you go on without using up your cranial capacity? Watch this. If with 100 billion brain cells we can go on how many millions of years? 12. If you have 200 billion brain cells, how many million years can you go on? 24? No. You forgot the factor that every one of those additional brain cells has 50,000 neuron connections to other brain cells. I had a math professor calculate this for me, and he found that with every one of those 200 billion brain cells having 50,000 neuron connections, and each of those with 50,000 neuron connections, each of those with 50,000 neuron connections, we could go on for 10 billion quadrillion years without using up our brain capacity. That's over 1 billion times longer than the most avid evolutionists suggest the stars of the universe will shine. Wow. But I'm not finished. Hold the clock. In the book, I cite the work of a neurologist at Arizona State University has found that every one, not only is information stored in the cell, but in the brain cell, but every one of those neuron connections has the computing power of a desktop computer. Meaning, when you add to that not only is information stored and interrelated with every brain cell, but every molecule, every atom, and every subatomic particle. That means that your brain was designed to go on forever and forever and forever and forever. Now neurologists have gotten smart enough to create a helmet where they give gentle pulse DC electromagnetic stimulation to the brain. They can pinpoint it. When they stimulate the limbic system, that's central. All the visual imagery goes through the limbic system. All of the basic philosophy goes through the limbic system. And it's just above the circle of Willis, so it gets all of the oxygen it needs in your brain. When they stimulate that, approximating the electromagnetic field that we had originally, watch this, they find that every patient, whether that patient is a professor, an atheist, person off the street, a mentally inept individual, or a brilliant philosopher. Every patient they've tried, when they put this helmet on them and gently stimulate with pulsed DC electromagnetic energy, the limbic system, every one of them says, wait a minute, everything fits together. I have sensed the presence of God in here. Some Christians have been stimulated and they said, wow, in my mind, I sense Jesus Christ. And that's recorded in the technical literature. What I'm saying is, God created you, and He created you with an inbuilt capacity to know that He's alive, that He's very present, that He's your Lord, and He wants you to have fellowship with Him. There's one way to know Him. That's through His Son, Jesus Christ. Will you stand?